What's happening, football fans? Kevin Smith with you for a Thursday episode of the Call Sheet Daily. Hope everybody's having a great week as we now push a little bit towards springtime. Got some flowers popping up in the flower bed outside. That's always exciting for me. Can't wait to get outside, work in the yard, shake off some of the rust of winter, get myself back in shape. That time of year, man. And with the football landscape heating up, it's also an interesting time to be talking about what's on that horizon. But today I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. We've been talking about free agency a lot. I've had some good guests on. I'm going to have a great guest on tomorrow. Sal Marquez, great coach here in southern New Jersey. But I have this calendar. My mom got it for me for Christmas. My mom has for probably the last 40 years of my life, given me every Christmas this calendar that has like 365 football facts on it. They change every year. It's just become this tradition. And it sits on my desk, and I peel them off every day. I look at the little fact or statistic. And today's fact, March 20th, was happy birthday, Jay Berwanger. Happy birthday to Jay Berwanger. Now, if that's not a name that you know, one, totally understand. But two, you should. You should know the name Jay Berwanger. Why should you know that name? Because Jay Berwanger was the first ever recipient of the Heisman Trophy. It wasn't called the Heisman Trophy when he received it. As a matter of fact, the manner in which he received it was very interesting. Jay Berwanger was a running back at the University of Chicago. And in 1935, the University of Chicago in 1935 was really known as the epicenter for the study of physics in the United States. They had just split the atom, for God's sake. The atom was first split on a squash court at the University of Chicago in 1933. And 2 years later, their star running back, Jay Berwanger, got a letter from the Downtown Athletic Club of Manhattan informing him that he had won the award as the best football player east of the Mississippi River. And that, the very next year, would be renamed the Heisman Trophy. So Jay Berwanger won it in 1935. He received it via telegram. He got a nice little trophy and a trip for two to New York City. And the following year, Jay Berwanger entered the NFL draft, the first ever NFL draft, and he was the first player taken. So not only was Jay Berwanger the first recipient of the Heisman Trophy, but he was the first ever player drafted into the NFL. And he was drafted into the NFL by the Chicago Bears. And he asked for a salary of $25,000 a year. Top overall pick in the draft, and he wanted $25,000 a year. But it was the midst of the Great Depression. And the coach and owner of the Bears, George Halas, decided that was just too much money. And rather than negotiate with the Bears, Jay Berwanger ditched football and went into a career as a foam rubber salesman. Never played in the NFL. And that's probably why you've never heard of Jay Berwanger, never played in the NFL. Instead, pursued a career in foam rubber sales. But as I read all of this, as I looked all this up, I thought to myself, that's interesting, man. And then I thought, there's a lot of Heisman Trophy winners who don't succeed in the NFL. So I did sort of a deep dive into the success of Heisman Trophy winners in the NFL. And it's really interesting, man. What you find is overwhelmingly Heisman Trophy recipients did not go on to have great NFL careers. Obviously, some did. There's names that leap out. Roger Staubach, O.J. Simpson, Tony Dorsett, Marcus Allen, Barry Sanders, Charles Woodson. In more recent years, guys like Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. Those are all Heisman Trophy winners who have had or are having great NFL careers. But for every one of those guys, there are multiple guys whose professional careers didn't pan out or didn't live up to the hype that you would anticipate accompanying a Heisman Trophy winner. there have been trends in Heisman Trophy winners that have really fit the nature of the game of football. For example, from 1935, when Jay Berwanger won the first ever Heisman Trophy, to 1983, 49 years of football. 36 of those Heisman Trophy winners, 36 of those 49 in that period, 1935 to 1983, were running backs. And that makes a lot of sense because football, both college and pro football, was a run-first, run-dominant sport. And it made sense that the Heisman Trophy winners would be running backs. But despite the fact that the game was suited to great running backs or to the run game, a lot of those Heisman Trophy winners did not go on and find great NFL success. I mean, here are some of the names. Clinton Frank, Niall Kinnick. You might know the name Niall Kinnick because he was from the University of Iowa, and Kinnick Stadium is where the Hawkeyes play. But he didn't have a great NFL career. Tom Harmon, Bruce Smith, not the Bruce Smith from the Buffalo Bills, but the running back from the University of Minnesota in the early 1940s. Angelo Bertelli, Les Horvath, Johnny Lujack, Leon Hart, Billy Vessels, John Latner. These are all running backs who won the Heisman Trophy who had obscure NFL careers. You got to remember, too, the NFL back in those days didn't pay real well. So it wasn't like you were going to get rich by going to the NFL. As you get up into the 1960s and 70s, guys like Mike Garrett, Steve Owens, Pat Sullivan, Johnny Rodgers, Archie Griffin, who won it twice. Archie Griffin didn't have a great pro career. Charles White, from USC, he didn't have a great pro career. Mike Rozier, Nebraska, didn't have a great pro career. When you get up into the 80s, you start to see things change. Why? Because the game of football is changing. You're beginning to see now the passing game take on more importance. And Heisman Trophy winners began to reflect those changes. Between 1984 and the end of the century, 1999, in those 16 years, it was pretty mixed. You had 7 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a defensive back win the Heisman Trophy. So there was some balance there. But in the new century, in the 21st century, it has been overwhelmingly quarterback dominant. There have been 25 Heisman Trophies awarded in the 2000s, from 2000 to 2024, and 20 of them, 80%, have been won by quarterbacks. 20 out of 25. And interestingly, the vast majority of those players have not gone on to become great pro quarterbacks. I mean, here's the list. From 2000 to 2023. Chris Wenke, Eric Crouch, Carson Palmer, Jason White, Matt Leinart, Troy Smith, Tim Tebow, Sam Bradford, Cam Newton, Robert Griffin III, Johnny Manziel, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota. That takes you up to 2014. There's not a great pro quarterback in that bunch. There were some good ones. Carson Palmer was a good one. Could have been maybe a great one. That knee injury he suffered in the playoffs against the Steelers in 2005 probably cut his career short, or at least affected it in a way that didn't allow him maybe to achieve the greatness he could have. Cam Newton had some great years, no doubt. No doubt. Had some great years. Took the Carolina Panthers to a Super Bowl. Won a bunch of games in Carolina. Physical style of play, though, the nature of his play. I talked about Cam Newton on the show yesterday when I was doing a deep dive on the power read concept. Auburn ran the power read to the national championship with Cam Newton. But his physical style of play in the NFL probably took some years off his career. RG3, similarly, man, couldn't stay healthy. He wasn't built for that pro quarterback run game. He was about 190 pounds soaking wet. And RG3 got dinged up early in his career, and that affected him. Jameis Winston's still playing. He's been around a long time, but he was the top overall pick in the draft and a Heisman Trophy winner. And I don't think his career's ever matched those lofty college accolades. I mean, really, you got to go to Lamar Jackson, who won the Heisman in 2016. And Lamar Jackson kind of initiated a run of quarterbacks over the last decade who have won the Heisman Trophy and have done or are doing very well in the pros. The list over the last 10 years: Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Jalen Daniels. They've all gone on to become starters or stars. Lamar Jackson is an MVP. Joe Burrow is arguably one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL, has taken the Bengals to the Super Bowl. I mean, man, Jalen Daniels looks like he is the next superstar at the position. Baker Mayfield, slow start, but's put together some really good years the last couple of seasons in Tampa Bay. I think the reason is this. Some of those earlier quarterbacks didn't succeed. Some of those guys we named earlier on, the Wankies and Crouch and Jason White, Troy Smith, Tebow, because they either came from read option, run dominant college schemes like Tebow did, and they never developed NFL passing games, or the opposite. Eric Crouch is another example, or they came from spread schemes that threw the ball around a ton, but didn't learn how to play under center and do some things in the pro style passing game. Troy Smith is an example there. In some instances, when the passing game became all the rage, the college passing game and the NFL passing game were 2 different animals. But in recent years, we've seen those 2 things married up. You've seen college schemes matriculate up to the NFL. You're seeing NFL passing games become more common in the college ranks. College playbooks and NFL playbooks starting to look a lot more similar than they once did. NFL coaches warming up to the idea of dual threat quarterbacks and figuring out how to use them wisely. Guys like Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, who can run and throw. And rather than just say, hey, we're going to run a ton of power read because we got a freakish athlete like Cam Newton, we're going to figure out how to get these guys on the perimeter but protect them a little bit better. And, hey, they can throw the ball too. They can throw the ball. So it's interesting. We are seeing, at least in the last decade, a greater percentage of Heisman Trophy winners, specifically at the quarterback position, but in general, become more successful pros. I think that's interesting. Even the non-quarterbacks that have won it the last couple of years, over the last decade, there's only been 3 of them in the last decade. Derrick Henry, Devonta Smith, and this year's winner, Travis Henry, who I'm going to get to in a second. But in the case of Henry and Smith, guys are having great NFL careers. The other 2 non-quarterbacks to win the Heisman and go on to the pros this century, Reggie Bush and Mark Ingram, they both had solid careers. Not spectacular, but solid NFL careers. But it gets me to Travis Hunter, sorry. Confused him with Derrick Henry there for a second. Travis Hunter. He is the most unique Heisman Trophy winner probably since Charles Woodson won it back in the 1990s. Travis Hunter was this past season both, in addition to being the Heisman Trophy winner, both the Biletnikoff winner, given to the best wide receiver in the nation, and the Bednarik winner, given to the nation's top defensive player. Think about that for a second. The same guy won the award for best wide receiver in the country and best defensive player in the country, and then won the Heisman for best overall player in the country. There's no question the best football player in this draft is Travis Hunter. Where's he going to play? It's a fascinating debate. I was just reading an article on The Athletic that had NFL players talking about where they see Travis Hunter. It's interesting. Many of them think his ceiling is higher as a D-back than it is as a wide receiver. And they all kind of make the same argument. Here's their argument. He's a phenomenal wide receiver. But the instincts that make him, and the ball skills, that make him a phenomenal wide receiver don't exist in most D-backs. Most D-backs are great at defending receivers, but they don't have phenomenal receiver instincts, and they're not certainly at his level, at Travis Hunter's level, as guys who can go get the football, as guys with elite level instincts. So some of the plays that he can make as a D-back are plays that most D-backs simply can't make because they're not also elite wide receivers. Will Travis Hunter become the NFL's first true two-way player? We've seen guys dabble in it. His coach at Colorado, Deion Sanders, dabbled in it. But you have to go way back. You got to go back to like the 1960s, like Chuck Bednarik. You know, the guy who the award that Travis Hunter won as the nation's best defensive player. It's named after Chuck Bednarik. Chuck Bednarik is probably the last full-time two-way pro and a pro player. Played center and linebacker. And there's lots of obstacles to this. One is how involved the playbook is at the NFL level and the sheer amount of meetings you have to go to. How Travis Hunter they're going to have to declare a primary position, and then his primary position coach and coordinator, they're going to want him in all those meetings all the time to make sure he knows what the heck's going on. And anything that they do to take him out of there so he can go to the meetings on the other side of the ball is going to take away from his ability to be great at his primary position. Do you run the risk in allowing Travis Hunter to be a two-way player of making him a jack of all trades and a master of none? Do you run the risk of him being good on both sides of the ball, but not great, not elite on either? It will be very interesting to see where he lands and what they do with him. Top 5 picks in the draft: Tennessee, Cleveland, the New York Giants, New England picks 4th, Jacksonville picks 5th. There's no way he slips out of the top 5. But man, and you look at those first 3 teams, Tennessee, Cleveland, and the Giants, they all need quarterbacks. If I were a team like New England or Jacksonville and I had my quarterback, I would think long and hard about moving up into the top 3 to get Travis Hunter. Make sure nobody comes in from behind me, a team like Vegas maybe at number 6 that wants to jump up in there and get him. I would make sure I land this guy. I think he's a generational football player. I think he's a unique football player. I think he could be the best non-quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy and turn in the best NFL career of any of them. Any of them. And you know, this includes, again, man, some big names like Barry Sanders and Marcus Allen, etc. I think he has the potential to have the best professional career of any non-quarterback to ever win the Heisman Trophy. It'll be fascinating to see where he lands. All right. So in honor of Jay Berwanger, who passed away in 2002 and was the first ever recipient of the Heisman Trophy, it is Jay Berwanger's birthday. Happy posthumous birthday to Jay Berwanger. And you piqued my curiosity about the Heisman Trophy and the success that winners have in the NFL. And it brings us to Travis Hunter, who will be a fascinating story in this year's draft. All right, that's our show for Thursday. Hey, join me tomorrow. Can't wait to do our conversation tomorrow with longtime coach here in Southern New Jersey, Sal Marquez, a legend, a guy who has won double-digit championships, and he's going to talk about building toughness in your program in an era where many people say that young people are soft these days. Coach Marquez is going to talk about how his program thrived on toughness. So you join me for that conversation tomorrow. That's going to be a great one. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Take care.